Whisper words, you come to me. The song I sing for all to see. The past is gone and now I know. Inside this cell, nowhere to go. Oh love, I love, look at your love. Your love, a dancing clown upon the wall. He's calling all to City Hall. Your grave is mine, oh can't you see? It's your own kind to be free. Oh love, I love, look at your love. Your love, the truth I've known, you are the king. I love this world, to you I bring. You know, you can be free. Look at your kind and come to me. Oh love, I love, look at your love. Your love, this court of law, they hide my words, the truth in words you never heard. Why do they fear and see in me inside themselves? I know you see. Oh love, I love, look at your love. Your love.
This podcast assumes that you have a general knowledge of the Tate LaBianca murders. Sharon Tate Polanski, Jay Sebring, Wojciech Frykowski, Abigail Folger, and Stephen Parent were murdered on Cielo Drive in Los Angeles on August 9, 1969. Lena and Rosemary LaBianca were slain in their Los Feliz residence the following night. Charles Manson, Charles Watson, Susan Atkins, Patricia Quenwinkle, and Leslie Van Houten were convicted of those murders. Say hello to the Goodbye Helter Skelter podcast. And hello indeed. Welcome to the Goodbye Helter Skelter podcast. I hope that everybody can hear me tonight, and I have a computer here that's going to show me the feed. So in case you can't, this time I will know for sure. So I hope I have all the bugs cleared up for this episode, that you'll be able to hear me for the whole time. If not, let me know. And this time, if Bruce Fox calls, I'm going to answer the phone. So stand by for that. Now, I do want to say welcome to the show. Tonight, we're going to have another topic building on the one we had last week about the blood evidence. And I have a guest tonight that's going to help me. He's somebody you all know, and he's Paul from the Paulcast. So I'm going to bring him into the studio right now so we can start this going. So, Paul, are you here?
Yep, I'm here. Hello, George.
And you can hear me?
Yeah, you bet.
You can hear everything I'm saying? Everybody's saying that? I see
so
and hear
far,
you.
So good.
I see and hear you, says Mega Zorlock, and I'm going to be getting back to him in one of his comments. So, anyway, Paul and I are here. Well, the first thing I want to do, speaking of the guest list and the chat room, is go over some of the points that were brought up in the last chat. I went over and copied down some of the things, so I just want to cover those, some of the things. And we'll be talking about some of these later in the show, but I just want to cover them now. Both Paul of the Paulcast said that they believe that the bodies were tied after they were moved, and we'll be getting into why they believe that, I hope. Paul also believes that the killers went in the front door. Now, interestingly, I had two people, Andre Ball and Jay Bolton, both had an interesting observation, and they said that they thought the blood stain looked like a body. So I want to show you something here. This is what they're talking about. Now, if he said it looks like the blood stain is the body of Jay Sebring, and if you look at Jay Sebring, you can see the outline. You can see him with his knees folded up and everything. And I could see where someone might think, gee, that sure looks like a body was lying there. But the problem with that is, if you look at that post there, I don't know if that's a 6-inch post or an 8-inch post, but either way, that makes that blood stain only about 2 feet long. So the scene of Jay Sebring lying there wouldn't fit, because Jay Sebring, he was a small guy, but he wasn't that small. So that takes that out of the equation. So, and that's what I'm trying to do, is if I can take as many things out of the equation as I can, then we can maybe find out what the real solution to the equation is. And I'm looking here, and everybody's saying, good morning, Danny. Hello, Linda, everybody else. Hey, okay, everybody can hear me. Great.
Mhm.
So,
Should I wait to comment on those things until
pardon me?
later on? Should
You
I
can
wait?
no, you can comment anytime you want. We're not structured
Okay.
here. I mean, if you
Okay.
want to.
I think that the blood stain there, I do think was Jay Sebring, and I
Okay,
think that he fell into the. I see what they mean by him, the way he was lying,
right.
and part of his body, I believe, fell over onto those bushes. Now,
Hmm.
the reason I think that that's Jay Sebring is the blood saying that it was his blood type. And I remember you saying
Hmm.
last time that you thought
Hmm.
they'd either messed it up or that it was transferred, but that's a lot of blood.
No,
And
that is a lot of blood, and actually, it's more blood than you think. And I want to show that because I have a. Let me just go over this list again. We're
sure,
talking about blood being smeared on Sharon Tate Polanski. Surely she's going to have a lot of blood on her. She was stabbed in the heart 3 times. She was not wearing clothing and being held by Susan Atkins. There's going to be a lot of struggling. I'm not surprised that she had a lot of blood all over her body, but I don't think it was intentionally smeared. It's probably just smeared during the process of her dying, rather. Uh,
yeah.
we had,
I
what? Go
Sorry,
ahead.
go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Okay, I was
You
just
go.
going to say I had when I was looking, because I was doing homework for this over the
Yes.
last week, and I
Good.
had a couple of different thoughts of how things could have gone down on why the blood is out front, why all the Folger and Frykowski blood is on the other side of the house.
Mm-hmm.
And
Wow.
it's interesting to me, if you look at the picture of Sebring in the living room and of Tate in the living room,
Yes.
there's far more blood around Tate. There's far more blood under Tate. There's like a pool like there is on the front porch of.
Well, I'm getting to that. I'm glad you brought that up, because I have that picture right here and I want to show it to everybody. We're looking at the living room of 10,050 Cielo Drive. Now you
Right,
can see there in front of the couch, there's a great amount of blood and a big
right.
soaking where it probably came out of her heart, if you know where she was lying there. And also
Yeah,
you can look over by the corner of the chair and you can also see a very large, deep blood stain. And I really don't want to show the death scene pictures, but you
no.
can look at them online, and that's exactly where Jay Sebring was huddled up on the ground, where his heart would have been, and he was stabbed in the aorta. So you have a lot of blood coming out there, and you have a lot of blood uh, coming out from Sharon Tate Polanski in front of the couch. Now
See
you're
the
going.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Oh, okay, I was going to say, see, where you say that that's a lot of blood where Jay Sebring is, not, I don't think in comparison, once that rug is moved as well, it shows that there's not as much blood. What I think happened, just to go over quick before like
Hmm.
getting into it deeply, I
Yes.
think Jay Sebring, because you can bleed out in 4 or 5 minutes,
Yep.
especially if you have a really, like, intense injuries like
Hmm.
he had.
Hmm.
I believe he was killed there. I believe Sharon got stabbed but ended up back in the living room before she died. Now there's the trail of drops of blood and little bits of blood here and there that
Hmm.
are the O,
Hmm.
like her and Jay, but
Right.
because some of them they put the I forget what the word is for the M and the MN,
Mm-hmm.
but for some of them they just put O, and some of
Right.
them they just put B, right?
Right.
So
Right.
so those ones you're like, okay, is this Sebring, or is
Mm-hmm.
this Sharon? With the
Mm-hmm.
amount of blood that's in the living room of Sharon, I believe she was finished off in the living room. I think
Mm-hmm.
Jay was moved after the fact, because there's not, to me, that's not a lot of blood compared to what's on the front porch where Jay Sebring was. There's also where Sharon was stabbed. You have the other, on the other side of the porch there, you actually have some arterial spray. So she
Mm-hmm.
got hit once
Mm-hmm.
and ended up inside. The thing that I don't like, things that I can't say for certain is why they were both out front there,
Mm-hmm.
and B, why I think Sharon was tied around the neck pre being killed, but
Mm-hmm.
I think Sebring's was after the fact,
Mm-hmm.
just when they moved him inside.
Okay,
And
well,
so,
we'll get to that definitely.
okay.
Uh, now, as far as, so you're not saying, one of the theories I heard was that that they opened the door for the killers, and
Mhm.
that's what they were doing at the front door. Now, the only problem I have with that is if they open the door for the killers, you have Susan Atkins and Linda Kasabian, and later Charles Watson, after he changed his mind, uh,
Yeah.
saying that he went in through the dining room window. Plus, there is the picture of the cut screen by the dining room window. So that to me
Right.
is pretty good evidence. You can say Linda Kasabian lies all the time and Susan Atkins isn't reliable. That's true, but the screen by the window is a pretty conclusive piece of evidence that somebody went in that window. And
Somebody did, I believe. I think that because of the way, like when you, like on the show we did last time talking about it being Linda having been up there before,
mm-hmm,
as a bunch of the people in the commune had said, and
mm-hmm.
then Watson having been up there before.
Well,
I
lots of
think they were let in. I don't think they started killing right away. I
mm-hmm.
don't think that happened,
Why
but I
then?
think that
Why do you think the screen is off the window?
because I don't think they knew the other people were coming in. I think they snuck in the back while Tex was in the front with Kasabian, and also some of the killers had said that Krenwinkel in particular had said that she remembers Linda being in the house
Mm-hmm.
with them,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
yeah, so I think that they were let in, but I think that things went sideways. Like absolutely speculating, because
Mm-hmm.
I think it was a robbery of some sort, like
Mm-hmm.
for drugs. I
Mm-hmm.
think they could have been going to take Jay and Sharon somewhere to go
Mm-hmm.
and get something, and then like Jay attacked Tex or something happened, and Jay was killed right then, and Sharon caught one and ran back into the living room where she was, held down by Susan Atkins or
Mm-hmm.
somebody. I find that there's a lot of half truths in a
Mm-hmm.
bunch of these things.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah,
so where you have like Susan Atkins saying she held Sharon down, I absolutely believe that. And I
right.
think that she did get killed in the living room because there's
Mm-hmm.
a ton of blood in there.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like her heart must have been still pumping
Mm-hmm.
for that much blood to get out of her body, because it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't take long for it to just be like, seeping wounds.
Right.
If you, yeah.
Well,
So
she was
anyway,
stabbed in the heart 3 times.
yeah.
That's a good solid hit into a source of blood, and he was stabbed in the aorta, which is another one.
Hmm.
So, well, that's a pretty complicated scenario, Paul, that you have there. A lot. It's a lot. It's a lot simpler than the one I accept. Is that they went in the front window and basically uh, what happened. I pretty much believe that what the people say happened at the residence did happen. I also believe there was coaching by Vincent Bugliosi for both Susan Atkins and Linda Kasabian, and that affected their testimony. And
Right, for sure.
because certainly, if you're going to have, can people hear that dog?
Oh yeah, that's good.
Okay,
That's your other helper next to
okay,
Cinnamon.
okay. And that's a neighbor's dog. He's good. He watches our house too. So
Oh, nice.
okay. So let me see. Okay, well, we're talking about that, and we can come back to how they went in the front door. Let's see. We've got Charlie Six's the arterial bleeding on the et cetera on the pillar. Um, Charlie 16 also says experiment showed minimal blood transfer and cannot account for all the blood on the porch. Now, I do want to speak for that and qualify my experiment a little bit. That was mentally mainly meant to be an experiment to see if any blood would drip after about 24 feet. And I wasn't trying to replicate the front porch. I had to pour that stuff on myself, and I probably had about a cup of artificial blood on me. And as Charlie 16 later says that that's at least 2 cups of blood on the porch. So if I could have had a little more cooperation and had people pouring stuff over me, maybe I could have done better. But that the experiment wasn't meant to replicate the front porch exactly. It was just supposed to show that yes, blood could carry that far. And that was before I realized that Jay Sebring's blood carried all the way to the gate button. But
well, I'm sure that if Tex had pressed that button after having either moved or just still had Jay's blood on his hands, like that would have for sure come off on the thing there. I have a quick question about your experiment. Yes. How close are your neighbors? And did they see you doing that?
That wasn't exactly done at my house, and it was done far down a driveway out of sight of anybody, just about. Yeah.
Okay. I was super curious.
I wanted to go out and do it in the street because I thought it would be a better surface for the blood to land on than a driveway, but I just couldn't see it, even briefly. We would have been swarmed. So
yeah, for sure.
I mean, I wish I could have had a real 30-foot nice porch or something to do it on. I just couldn't figure it out. I couldn't do it.
So, yeah, fair.
Okay, knock it off, Leo. All right, let's see what else. Charlie 16 says the blood's consistent with a porch attack. We're going to get back to that. And I did want to clarify one thing about mentioning Susan Atkins' bloody feet. I didn't mean to imply that her feet were bleeding so much that she let that much blood. Simply that she could have contaminated the scene a little bit and possibly, messed it up a little bit. I think overall that the blood investigators in this case were, I wouldn't say they were negligent, but I think they were overwhelmed. I don't think when the police got to that scene, they had any idea what they were doing. They were just overwhelmed. There were bodies everywhere, bludgeoned, stabbed, shot, blood everywhere. I really think that they were, well, like I say, overwhelmed by the situation, because that's an incredible crime scene to walk into. Complex, a lot of different victims in different places, and a lot of shock just too. You'd be in a state of shock walking around the place like that, I think. So
yeah, I have a question for you about Frykowski.
Yes.
Because there wasn't much, there was like drips of B type blood on the way out towards the pool and around to the Abigail, but Frykowski was B as well, and they didn't put a subtype, so it could have been either of them. For me, the thing that I'm curious about with you is because you were saying that he had a lot of damage, right? But didn't most of his damage happen on the lawn where he fell? Like, wasn't he bludgeoned and stabbed a bunch?
Well, actually, when you look at his autopsy report, it's interesting. A lot of the stab wounds that he got on the lawn were actually, he's lying on his right side, I believe, and they're actually in his left arm, and they're very, and I don't mean to minimize the damage done to him, but there's a lot of like 15 or 16 stab wounds that are only about an inch deep, and they're in his arm. So I don't know how effectively Charles Watson was tearing into him when he was on the lawn, but I was surprised at how many of his wounds were, I don't want to say superficial, and I do want to go a little, before we go any further into this, because it's getting a little grim, but we are talking about evidence here, and the evidence is the bodies and the blood in the case. And so I don't mean to minimize the character of the victims and treat them like they were pieces of evidence, but that's what they are in this case. So when Amy C said that she couldn't believe we're talking about humans, I got that exactly. And just going through this whole subject, it seems like you're getting very callous, and he was stabbed here and moved over here and bled over here, and his aorta was cut, and it's pretty dispassionate, but that's the way it has to be when you're talking about evidence, even if the evidence are formerly human beings.
Right. So, absolutely. Well, that's how I guess that's how it goes. We're all kind of being armchair detectives at this point. And when they're sitting there talking about evidence, they're hashing it out like this. And none of us, I mean, people should know that when we're talking about this stuff, it doesn't have anything to do with the way we feel about like what it's awful what happened. A pregnant woman died, right? Of course it's awful.
Mm-hmm.
But when we're looking at it as clinically as we are, like you said, it's not, it has nothing to do with what we think about the people as people. It's just
right. That's true too. And also, it depends upon your point of view. Now, my point of view is that they were random victims. So I could care even less about their characters. If they were doing all
right.
this other stuff, it doesn't really matter. If they were Girl Scouts or a pornography studio, it doesn't matter. They were going to die no matter who was there. So
Right.
some of the backstory about the victims and their histories and characters is interesting, but to me, it's not relevant because I believe they were random victims. Other people believe other things, and they can draw whatever conclusions they want to do. Let me just check the chat just in case somebody.
Yeah, you betcha.
Okay, you can't go much deeper in. Oh, yes, that's right. Okay, that's right. You can't go much deeper than an inch on an arm. The fellow Clifford says. There he goes.
Right.
Okay.
Unless you're cutting Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, well that's a good point, and he wasn't there, and how much trouble would they have been in if he was?
Yeah.
So
On the 6 degrees of separation that way, there are pictures of Sharon Tate's sister with Arnold Schwarzenegger when she was a lot younger.
Now there's something. We'll make a whole show out of that.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so I think I've got everything covered here. Norman Maroon pointed out that Sharon Tate Polanski's and Jay Sebring's blood was the only blood on the porch, according to the cops, and that is true. But we have to consider somebody else who was on the porch, and that's Wojciech Frykowski. And we do know you're talking about his injuries, getting a lot of beef on the lawn, but we do know that, or we have reason to believe that he was stabbed in the legs by Susan Atkins on the way out, and that once he was going out the door, he was shot once, at least once, which wouldn't have caused a lot of bleeding. But then Watson was after him pretty soon, hacking at him. When Kasabian says he came out the front door, he was bleeding. He was leaning against the door jamb. Then he was leaning against the pillar. Then he fell into the bushes. And again, you can say, well, Linda Kasabian lies about everything, but if she says somebody fell into the bushes and you can see bushes where somebody fell into, that's sort of corroborating what she said. And you can
she
say,
could
well,
have missed. Sorry, go ahead.
You could have said, well, it could have been Jay Sebring that fell into the bushes, but I'm just going by what she said.
Right.
I think here's what I think. You talk about the ropes going on people. I think that the ropes, and again, you can look in the autopsy photos, not the death scene photos, but the autopsy photos where they've got the towel off Sebring. The ropes knotted around his neck pretty tightly, and also Sharon Tate Polanski's got a rope around her neck a couple times, and they're knotted pretty tightly. So my theory would be that if I were going to murder a bunch of people, it might be beneficial to my point of view if I got them immobilized and I could see looping ropes around their neck, loop, loop. And I almost wondered, if that's something that Watson picked up being in Texas that they do with cattle or something. To subdue them, because
right.
if you loop the rope around somebody's neck a couple times and went 6 feet and looped it around another, they're going to be pretty much immobilized.
Right. The interesting thing about the ropes and why I think that Sharon had it on while she was alive and Jay didn't is because she actually had an abrasion on her neck from the rope, and also like nail marks, what they figured were fingernail marks of her trying to take the thing off, where Jay didn't have any of that. And the thing about Wojciech Frykowski coming out of the house, I believe because of the blood evidence, that him and Abigail both went out the side door, because it does just go past the pool, and Abigail got caught first. It both goes onto the lawn, and the only way out of Cielo Drive is the gate, right? Like where they would drive down the road of Cielo. But I don't think that I don't think Linda was right in, regardless of how little I think she told the truth. I don't think she had the right guy coming out front there just based on the blood evidence. And because Jay could have just as easily been the guy to come out there, lean on the post where all the blood is, fall into the bushes where they did, and it's his blood type, right? It wasn't like B with no subtype.
There's no blood typing for Frykowski on the front porch at all.
not on the front porch, but there is the B type going through the
Right, but
back
the
end,
B,
which
but the
is
B,
both him and Abigail Folger,
right,
because
and
they don't have the subtypes.
right, and Stephen Parent, but that doesn't mean they both went out the door, because that's a major variation from what we believe is the story. And again, I'm going with a narration that I'm getting from people like Susan Atkins and her grand jury testimony, uh, Linda Kasabian, not so much Pat Krenwinkel. I'm kind of curious to see these transcripts you're getting where she's saying all these things that I'm not aware of, and I can look at those later. But
Mhm.
I believe that here's what I believe. They were brought into the pretty much what Susan Atkins said happened. They were brought into the living room. They were subdued with the rope. Frykowski got away. They made a break for it. And Sebring went down early when he protested Sharon being treated roughly, so he's out of the picture already. And if he's lying on the floor with a rope around his neck attached to Sharon, she's not going anywhere. And then Frykowski makes a break for it out the front door, and he gets caught out there, bleeds all over the place, and ends up on the front lawn. And Abigail goes out the down the hallway and out through the French doors by the pool, and that explains her blood going out there. And of course, they did blood typing of Stephen Parent's blood, which is in the car, which is not really relevant to what we're talking about.
Right.
But so that's an interesting theory. But you know, I have to really hit something, to make a change like that. It's a variation from the story. That's me personally. I
Right.
can't say, gee, maybe Wojtek went out the dining room window.
Except, well,
That,
the only
you know,
thing is that the blood thing for me, and
yeah.
also I mean, it always sticks in my head. Uh, uh, Linda Kasabian's lawyer saying the truth is as follows, with
Hmm.
with her being given her testimony, and
Hmm.
also like the story that Susan told Virginia Graham and them in the prison, which I'm not sure if she was just trying to sound scary or if she was just a bit of a BS artist and was just trying to beef herself up as some sort of like tough chick.
Which story is that?
The one about like, licking the blood and
Oh
all
yeah,
that sort
yeah,
of thing,
yeah.
all
That's
that ridiculous
I think
nonsense.
that's embellishments. I think.
For sure. And
Yeah.
that's why I think that like just based on the blood types alone
Hmm.
is what is where, and looking at that I believe you put it up last time. You had that picture of the drawing of the house with the
Hmm.
circles of where the blood droplets were.
Hmm. Hmm.
And because both type B's were going out towards the pool
Hmm.
and the O types were out front,
Hmm.
that's what I'm basing thinking where Abigail and Frykowski went out the side door,
Hmm.
and whatever
Okay.
happened with Sharon Tate and them happened on the front porch.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. Boy, that's a real curveball, Paul. I had no idea we
Yeah,
were
it's
going there. So
sorry.
anyway, so I've gone over the chat list, and so we've also gone over that we've established that there was a lot of blood on the front porch and a lot of blood in the living room. So
Mhm.
to me, if the blood on the front porch, you're saying it's Sebring's, correct?
I'm saying, yeah, there's a lot more like the blood in the living room is compared of Sebrings as
Hmm.
compared to the blood on the porch
Hmm.
is minimal. Like it
Hmm.
it looks to me like he was put down in the living
Right.
room and tied up there after the fact. But I think Sharon was finished off in the living room because the amount of blood that's
Okay.
there is way more.
Okay. Okay. But I have something to tell you about that. Okay.
Okay,
Did you read Sebring's autopsy report?
I did. Yeah.
Did you read about all the blood that was inside his body? That most of the blood was inside his body, and that's why he died, because the blood kept his lungs from working, and that's why he suffocated on his own blood. So there was a massive amount of blood from his wounds, but it never came out of his body. And I think
Hmm.
it's 2,500 whatever milliliters or whatever, but you can check the autopsy report and see that. So
Sure.
to me, he goes down early. He's there bleeding on the floor, and that's the end of him. That's as far as he went. I can't see him being on the front porch.
but you also
because then he would have to be taken back into the room and tied up, and I don't see anybody doing that. And they would have to. Another thing I want to get to pretty quickly here is that the killers would have had to do that. When it comes to people dying, there's certain things that happen to the bodies, and one is that when you die, the blood stops circulating. So after a while, a short while, you're not really bleeding from your wounds anymore. There might be some blood seeping out, and certainly after an hour and a half, there's not going to be any blood leaking out of your body or pooling out or anything like that.
No.
Drip, anything like that. So there's one version of the story is that somebody from Spawn's Ranch went back to the house after the murders and moved the bodies. Now that's not possible, because if that were the case, if the bodies were on the front porch and they were moved into the living room area, there would be no blood in the living room area, because there would be no blood coming out of the bodies. And it's not a theory or an opinion. That's forensic pathology. That's a fact. There's no way that the bodies were moved an hour and a half after death and leaving that much blood where they were found. Even Jay Sebring's blood, what you say is a little amount, but check the autopsy report again, and you'll see a lot of his blood is still in his body.
Sure.
The other thing is about the lividity issue. When a person dies, one of the things that happens to the body is, and I said all this in my show the other week, but it didn't get heard because the sound was off. And let me check the screen. People are still hearing me? Yes?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay. You're all in, George.
So far, so good. Wow, third time's the charm. Lividity, it's called livor mortis, and what it means is when the blood stops flowing in the body, it starts to collect at the lower extremities of the body, and it's pulled there by gravity. And this starts happening 20 to 30 minutes after the heart stops beating, and after an hour and a half or 2 hours, it's collected so much in the body that it's actually visible. You can see it when you're looking at it. And when you look at the autopsy reports and the lividity diagrams, I want to show you one here. This is showing the lividity on Sharon Tate Polanski's upper left head. If you'll look at the death scene photos, her upper left head is resting on the floor. It's practically the lowest part of her body. And if you look at the autopsy photos of her on the slab, you can actually see that lividity on her forehead. So that's one thing that indicates that. And here's another one here. This is lividity on her inner right thigh, which if you look at the death scene photos, again, that's a lower area of an extremity that would have collected blood. Then you have Jay Sebring's lividity is on the right side of his face and the neck going down to about his right groin. And that's consistent with a person who is found in this position.
Right.
Totally consistent with that. And just to give you another example of lividity is Wojciech Frykowski. Here's his autopsy diagram. You can see the lividity on the right side of his head, pretty much the right side of his body, and on the right side of his back going down behind his shoulder. And again, that is totally consistent with the position that his body was found in. Now, why is that important and what does that mean? Lividity sets in 20 to 30 minutes after death. The discolorations are 2 hours after death. What that means is that those bodies were not moved any more than 20 to, if they were moved, let me rephrase that. Those bodies were in the same position when the people died. Excuse me. Bear with me, folks.
Yeah, no worries.
Those bodies were in the same position in the death scene photos that they were in 20 to 30 minutes after they died.
Right.
And again, that's no opinion or theory. That's forensic pathology. That's a fact. So if the bodies were moved, it had to have been done within 20 to 30 minutes after the people were killed. So you've narrowed it down quite a bit. I think we've narrowed our time frame down to a half an hour instead of all night.
Sure.
And we know who was there, so we know the personnel who was there. We don't have to wonder if it was Charlie and Brenda or Bruce or TJ. It wasn't any of them because it's impossible. It just didn't happen.
Well, there's
There's
the
no way.
on to play devil's advocate, so
Yeah.
to speak.
Yeah.
I think Jay could have been moved definitely before 20 minutes happened. And as far as setting up the scene afterwards, because there's been different people saying that it was, people came back afterwards. And that could have been for any number of things, for tying the rope around Sebring's neck, for the writing on the walls, stuff like that. Like that could have been done after the fact. But as far as the lividity goes, you're for sure.
But the bodies were not moved. Yeah, I'm
No.
not
And
saying
the way
I'm not
Jay,
saying somebody didn't go back there and look around, but they didn't move the bodies.
right, the
So
way that Jay Sebring fell off of the porch too, like the thing that you pointed out before, how the legs look like they were in the same position. Like Jay could have fallen that way out on the porch, just been picked up and moved in. He wasn't, I mean, dead weight is dead weight, but there were four of them there, right? So getting him inside, if they were planning on doing that, because if you see it looks like the leg is bent. Well, it's not a leg, but you see what I mean. He was stabbed up by the aorta. And so it looks like where the most blood is up there, it looks like up more on top of the body, and the bottom looks like a bent knee to me.
Right. I agree with you. It does look like that. But let me ask you this question: How big do you think that post is? 6 foot?
I think that it's. I think it's a
6 or 8.
I think it's an 8.
Okay, so if that's an 8, if you extrapolate that over to the right, you're looking 1, 2, 3. From the post to the buttock is 2 feet. Jake Sebring is not that small.
Right, but
It looks like a body, but it's not.
That's fair.
I agree, but that's not the imprint of a body because it's too small.
What about him going onto the top of his body down in the bush as well?
He'd have to have his back arch so much it'd practically snap his spine, I think, off the top of my head. Now, I do want to say something about this blood stain we're looking at in the name of full disclosure, because I don't want to think anybody's we're spending a lot of time looking at this blood stain, but when you look at this from a little further back, you can look out. This is from the entryway. You can look out onto the front porch there, and you can see the blood stain that we're looking at in the picture here. Let me show you this. I wish they'd let me reorder these. Okay, that blood stain here is in this picture where the arrow is. Now, do you see that other large blood stain that's not even in the picture we're looking at? You see it below the arrow? That's not even in the picture that we're looking at. I can show you this again. There's a little bit closer, and there's the post. There's the blood stain. You can kind of see the dark on the edge of the porch, and there's the arrow showing you the blood stain that is in the picture that we're looking at, which is this one right here. And if you look at the blood pattern right there by the arrow, to the right of the arrow, you can see that that's the same area here in the lower right, or lower left, where it says OMN, and you can see the same shapes. I just wanted to get that out there, and for full disclosure, saying that there was a lot of blood on that porch, more than we're looking at in the picture that we're looking at.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting that it's too bad there isn't more pictures, because it's tough to it was tough before seeing that other one. It's tough to know whether that post was up against the house or if it's the front of the walkway, which it seems to be the front of the walk. I guess over a little further.
It would have to be near because of the bushes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So now I've got a couple of more shots here. That's the blood in the doorway there, splatter. All of that to me is consistent with somebody like Wojciech Frykowski standing there bleeding and spurting blood. And you think it's amazing how much blood they didn't type. And I'm going to get into that here because I have a list of exactly what they did type. So let's see. No bleeding after 1.5 hours, so the bodies weren't moved. They had to have been moved within 20 minutes after the people died. And that's an unassailable fact. That's a forensic pathology, and it's not an opinion. So We're assuming then that all of this blood on the front porch is from Jay Sebring and Sharon Tate Polanski. Is that correct?
The stuff on the picture in the right is Jay Sebring, and the stuff on the left is typed as Sharon Tate.
That is correct. Okay. Okay, so I have where Sharon Tate Polanski's blood was found, and this is coming from the police reports, okay? And we have the picture right up. Okay. I just have one more question.
Sure.
If this blood that we're looking at the right here is Jay Sebring's blood, and the blood in the living room, let me bear with me. I'm learning.
Yeah, no worries. We're all here for you, George.
Okay, good. It means a lot to me, really. Okay. The blood there by the chair is also a lot of blood. So if he was bleeding that much on the porch and bleeding that much in the living room, I would think there would be a considerable trail of blood between those two blood areas. That's my opinion.
Right.
And there is not one.
See, and where I am with it, I don't think that's very much as far as somebody who got hit in the, like, especially if he bled that much on the porch, right? And so much of it stayed in his body, that could have just been transfer from his shirt, like for him laying there, especially if he had been moved in there quickly after. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm just saying I very much disagree with you. I don't think that's
no worries.
I don't think that's blood transfer from a shirt, but
that's why we're here, George.
Who knows? Who knows?
Yeah.
Okay, we have Sharon Tate Polanski's blood type OM found on a yellow towel and a beige towel, which we don't have. Now, there's blood on the porch 6 to 18 inches from the south side of the entry, and these are described as splatters, human blood. Blood on the rope. Blood on the east side of the doorway. I believe that the east side of the doorway is what we're looking at. Excuse me. Blood on the east side of the doorway between the entry and the living room. I believe that's the blood down at the bottom of these this little wall here in the center of the photo. Okay. Blood on the left side of the door jamb. You can see it right there, and that's the same blood. I'm pointing at it with my arrow, and nobody can see that. You can see it on the right side of the door. That's her blood. And the blood spatters on the front door next to the door, and then of course the word pig. Now you have Sharon Tate Polanski on the couch being held by Susan Atkins and stabbed 16 times, 3 times in the heart by Charles Watson. I'm guessing that Charles Watson and Susan Atkins, between them, had quite a bit of her blood on them. And again, I haven't done the experiment, but it's my belief that the blood you look at the blood in this picture we're looking at right now, it's almost in a straight line from somebody, perhaps a right arm, which was holding a bloody knife and swinging it. My opinion. Okay.
Right.
That's all it is. But if we're going to say Sharon Tate wasn't on the front porch, or if she did, she ran back in, that's all speculative, and I just don't see it matching the story that we know, because the story that we know matches everything except this mysterious blood on the front porch that nobody seems to know where it came from, even though it's generally believed that Wojciech Frykowski was on the front porch for some time, bleeding heavily from multiple stab wounds. Now, again, the police didn't type any of his blood on the front porch, which doesn't mean it was there, because as I said, they were overwhelmed, and they only took 35 blood samples, I believe, from the whole crime scene, which is not a lot. But Granado, as you know, is also collecting evidence, like the famous cord from the Sebring home. So he's doing more than blood samples.
You should check out what Charlie 16 is saying on the side here. One of the things, and I agree with him, is on the door there and on the wall and stuff. I totally think that could be Sharon running back in, but he says the blood on the pick is not drips, it's smears, because that is a lot to fall off somebody's arm. Like I think that with the footprints, with the drips and the way that they're going, I absolutely think Jay could have been taken out on the one side, been left out on the porch until they finished Sharon off in the living room. However, she got there by running or whatever. I don't think they carried her, because I think that she got there on her own and was taken down there. And it doesn't seem like somebody walking, because after all was said and done, I don't think that they would have had that much to fly off and land in the places that it did. Like little drips and drops, like are around that chair and on the bricks. I'm like pointing. Nobody can see what I'm pointing at. But the little drips in front of the wall, sure. But those big bunches of blood that are there, it just seems. But in my, like, we're both just talking about what we believe on this thing.
Right.
So for me, that seems more like Sharon trying to get away into the living room to go out the back and being taken out there. And Sharon had, women who are pregnant have twice as much blood in their body as usual.
So that would be twice as much blood on a killer too, right?
I mean, depending. Not twice. No, I don't think so. Not necessarily. I think that, especially because of the amount that was between the front porch and underneath the body of Sharon, sure, they could have a bunch on her, but it's gonna, especially if they're running around, it's gonna dry at some point. It's not gonna stay like dripping off them that much. Oh, well, and there's Charlie just says no. No.
Okay. Well, no, can't argue with that.
Yeah, no, that's pretty cut and dry. All right, show's over.
Okay. Not quite. I've got a few more things here. Okay. So you don't think any of the blood on the front porch is from Wojciech Frykowski?
No, I think he went out the side door with Abigail Folger. Yeah, I think that's how they both ended up out on the front lawn. I think they tried to go out the back. Yeah.
Why do you think all this body moving was going on? Was there a point behind it? I mean, why, if the people were dead on the front porch, why would you take them back into the living room?
Might have had something to do with them wanting to set the stage some way. That's the thing, is like I could speculate, but not in enough of a way. Like with the blood types being where they are, I can speculate that Frykowski and Folger went out the back, and Sebring and Tate were at the front. And with the amount of blood that was under Sebring in the living room as compared to his blood that was out on the porch, I think that it makes sense that he was moved in. For what reason? To set the stage for whatever. I could swing all day and maybe never come close to why, actually. But it's just by the blood evidence, that seems like what had happened to me.
I have Jay Sebring's blood was found among other places, but only relevant to us. Quote, on the front porch near the post, human blood. And once again, we look at this, and this is the diagram. Front porch near the post, human blood. If you look there in the lower or the left central part of the screen, you can see where Granado says that he got the sample for OMN out of that area right there. And if we're judging that the post is maybe an 8-foot post, 8-inch post rather, that's an 8 square inch thing of blood. OM. Quite a bit of dripping.
Linda Carroll makes a good point. She says we should get a blood splatter analyst. Well, if you know one, Linda, you send them our way. We'll get them up here.
Yeah. And unfortunately, all we have to go on are these pictures, and that's all that they would have to go on too. So,
absolutely.
I see. So I think a major part of our disagreement here is with the fact that we basically disagree on the whole scenario of the crime. And I'm accepting a version that's based on the testimony of the witnesses, which honestly, I don't have any reason to disbelieve. I mean, I don't know why they would say Frykowski went out the front door if he went out the bedroom door. Why wouldn't they just say that?
Probably just messed up who he was, especially if they didn't know who they were actually. Like, and they were all super high, right? Like, if say they don't know them at all, they've never ever
Mhm.
seen them,
Mhm.
then this thing happens really quick. They kill
Mhm.
everybody.
Right.
It's not that far out to think that Linda just messed up who was who. She doesn't know whose name is whose.
Right.
If we're going by
But
the
right. But they would still, Susan Atkins and Charles Watson would still know that a man went out the bedroom door as opposed to going out the front door,
right,
even
but
if they
they
didn't
didn't.
know who he was. Even if they didn't know who he was, they'd say, "Oh yeah," and then Abigail and the man ran out the bedroom door, and we chased them out the front lawn. You know, uh, why wouldn't they say that if that's what happened? There's no
Well, why
reason
wouldn't they say that Jay was stabbed out on the front porch, though? Right,
because
with all his blood being out there.
because he wasn't.
Right. And there's our impasse, ladies and gentlemen.
Mhm.
That's
Yeah.
because that's the thing is it's just with the blood evidence there. That's the thing I can't get past is how much blood is there and how it's
Well,
Sebring's blood type, and the only blood type of Frykowski's is going out the back door.
okay, but that's because I don't think, if you look at the analysis of the blood, there's nowhere where they said, and I typed a pool of blood on the front porch and it came out this. It's all splatters and things like that. It doesn't look like, I have a feeling that maybe when they were there, Granado didn't know what happened and he saw the blood on the front porch and maybe assumed that it was all from the same source. So rather than take 10 different samples in that area, which he might have been better, wiser to do, he just took one and said, well, this is all from one person. Just like you
Right.
wouldn't, they didn't take any blood samples under Sharon Tate Polanski's body because they figured, well, it's all from her. Why take a blood sample? So
Right.
unfortunately, we're left with incomplete work done by the police to go on. So that leaves a lot of wiggle room for different theories. The main thing, as you know, my approach to this case is Occam's razor. Take the simple solution. If you find something and the evidence seems to support it, you can go with it, not knowing absolutely what happened. If you find something that's odd, like somebody saying, well, they moved the bodies an hour and a half later, you can look at the forensic pathology and say, well, no, that couldn't have happened. It's not possible for it to happen because there wouldn't be any blood. So
Right.
there are certain things in the stories that you can check. There are certain
Mhm.
things that you can't check. Uh, but as I say, why wouldn't they say the man and the woman ran, whoever they were, ran out the bedroom door and we chased them down? And why wouldn't they say, and then the man who was the short man who was defending Sharon Tate Polanski ran out the front door and we grabbed him? And I don't know why why wouldn't you, if you said you tied him up before, why wouldn't you say you tied him up afterwards? I mean, I don't see why there's all this secrecy about the order of things and why it would be important for the killers to give a conflicting story. It's not like they're covering up. I can see covering up maybe if you said, well, we came at the front door and they greeted us and they knew us and you didn't want them to know that, you might say something different. But as far
Mhm.
as the scenario of the crime, what difference does it make?
Well, so it's interesting.
Why would you tell another story?
I mean, I can't tell you for sure, but it's interesting. The Occam's razor thing and going by the evidence. That's
Mhm.
See, that's what I feel like with the blood. That's what that is. When it comes to like physical evidence versus what the killers said after the fact and after being as messed up as they were, right? On speed, and Tex's brain was mush from the
Mhm.
Jimson weed and all this
Mhm.
sort of stuff.
Mhm.
Like that's kind of where I'm falling with it. I'm looking at the basically at the blood types to tell me
Mhm.
the story
Mhm.
of it. As far as like were they there because A, B, or C, it doesn't make a difference to the like what the way that we're looking at it by
Mhm.
the blood and stuff like
Okay.
that.
Okay. My contention then is to counter that is that
Sure.
the blood uh, was not typed enough that we know whose blood that is. If Wojciech Frykowski went out the front door uh, bleeding all over the place from multiple stab wounds, I would expect most of the blood on the front porch to be his, even if it wasn't typed. I would
Hmm.
expect the bushes being crushed to corroborate Linda Kasabian's recollection that he came out the door and fell into the bushes. I don't know why she would say that, unless of course, here you go again. You don't know how much Bugliosi coached these people, and he might have said something like, "Well, did he fall into the bushes, Linda?" And leading like that, and say, "Yeah,
Yeah.
he did." Now that you mention it, so we don't really know.
Right.
Any lawyer, a prosecutor, whether it's a grand jury witness or a witness they're calling, is going to be damn sure they've gone over the testimony. You're not supposed to. Lawyers are not supposed to ask a question that you don't already know the answer to. So
Right. Absolutely.
I'm sure these people were coached, and it would be very interesting to look at some of the testimony of them and see how it could be something that Bugliosi suggested. For example, when Susan Atkins says, "Well, I wrote pig on the front door with the towel, and then I threw it back into the living room," and Bugliosi says, "and it conveniently landed on, Jay Sebring's head under the rope." So,
Yeah.
uh,
2
good,
rooms
good,
over.
yeah, good throw, Susan. Uh, you know, you have to wonder if he didn't say something like, "Well, did you throw it back into the living room, Susan?" And Susan, of course, knowing that she has to testify truthfully, i.e., what they want her to say,
Hmm.
says, "Yeah,"
Yeah.
even though she
That,
maybe used the purple scarf to write the blood, which makes more
mhm.
sense.
Yeah. No, I agree with you on that one. I
So
think it. Sorry. Go ahead.
that would be worth a whole analysis to go through that stuff. In fact, I think there was even something where Susan Atkins was objecting to something that Bugliosi planted in her head because they had some pre-conference on December 4th before her grand jury testimony, and that's what called it to my attention because she said, "Well, he told me about political piggy at Gary Hinman's house. I didn't see that. He showed me a picture of it."
Right.
And that's what put that phrase into her head. So I think
Hmm.
there's quite a bit of witness manipulation that could have gone on with the DA, especially when he's promising them immunity, and
For sure.
they
For
have
sure.
they have an incentive to say what he wants them to hear.
Yeah.
So
And that's Linda Kasabian's lawyer made that quite clear in a few different interviews. One actually shortly after the trial itself in 72, I believe. To I forget what the guy's name is. He wrote articles and was a comedian. But I think an interesting thing to do, George, before we wrap up, would be if you want to scroll through some of these comments. There are
yeah.
some people making some really good points, and
Mhm.
they have some different questions.
Okay. Can I make
Um,
those go backwards? Oh, wait a minute.
yeah, oh yeah, you just go on it and scroll up. And the
Scroll
nice
up.
thing
Okay.
about about being on StreamYard here is you can go way back.
Yeah.
So Mega Zorlak has some good ones. Definitely Charlie 16, Manson Archives.
Yeah.
There's some wild ones in there,
So
but you
I'll
got
tell
to
you what,
expect that.
Mega Zorlax wants to see the picture from the house inside again, and I hope that one works for him. Is that all right, Mega? Okay.
Yeah. We'll also after this show's done, because we're going to be finishing up soon, I believe. I think I'll do
Okay.
a quick live afterthought for anybody who
Okay.
wants to ask any questions. And you're always
Okay.
absolutely feel free to come over, George. But if you're
Oh yeah.
done with it, no worries at all.
Hmm. Well, I'll tell you what. Uh, I've got a lot to think about this thing, but I do want to say one thing. I'm glad to have you as a guest anytime, but I do want to open this because I do know somebody asked about this in the last show. If I was planning to have this podcast set up so people could come in and participate live,
Mhm.
and I do want to do that. But one thing I don't want to do is open myself up to clowns. So if I'll tell anybody, if you do want to be on here, I don't care if you use your a fake name, but you're either going to have to be somebody that I've contacted with and know who you are, or you could be willing to have your actual picture put up, moving, speaking, while
Mhm.
you're doing your thing. Because if you don't want to do that, then I mean, honestly, I don't know. I understand people say, well, I can't really have people know that I'm into this so much. It's a big dirty secret.
Yeah.
I've never really understood that because, George Stimson is my real name. Uh, this
Mhm.
is my real face. And so all these people that are hiding behind pseudonyms and fake pictures, I get it, but I don't really get it. So I think if you're
Right.
serious about this, you could come on and at least show us what you look like, because I don't want to have the Phantom Wiener coming on here and pulling any stuff.
Yeah. The Venus Bandit.
I'm sorry that the Phantom Wiener was at the somewhere else. Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, let me see. Just there are a few episodes. There will be other episodes. Yeah, I want to do more episodes. I've already talked to some people uh, um, that I'm thinking of having on. If I talk to them and they've got some more leads to go on, they've been in
Mhm.
touch with me. Some of the people you told me about. But
Mhm.
I'm just going to scroll through this pretty quickly and see if there's anything I can answer. Contact transfer, blood and pregnancy. Jay was the size of a Girl Scout. Okay. Yeah.
See, yeah, I told you
Yeah.
there's some
You
crazy
know,
stuff.
I was surprised by that too. 122 pounds,
Very
5'6".
small
He was
dude,
actually he was actually very similar in size and weight to Charles Manson at that time.
right?
5'7", and Charlie was skinny when he was arrested. He was down to
Sure.
120. That's why he said he had to. Shorty Shea had 150 pounds on him.
So the best email to get a hold of you if people want to get on is
Oh,
contact@goodbyehelterskelter.com,
yes,
right?
yes. I will put that up in a minute. I have that here.
So where Dylan just said his full name, but Dylan, definitely send George an email
Okay.
and say that you want to be on and chat about it.
Yeah, anything. Because I think, you know, as I said, I'm trying to eliminate things that didn't happen, so maybe we can find out what did happen. I think it's pretty clear. People are probably pretty tired of my doctrinaire view on this and accepting things. It's pretty clear where I stand, but I do want to hear from other people and find out what they are, because I want to look into them. Because if they're valid, fine. But if they're not, I want to knock them down too, if I
Right,
can.
absolutely.
And
Yep.
I don't know how much I've done with this blood thing, but I hope everybody at least understands that if the bodies were moved, they were not moved uh, after a half an hour after death.
Right.
That didn't happen. So, what if there was movement? It had to have been done by the killers. So then I would have to say, why did they move them? Why did they tie them up after they were dead? You've already got two people dead on the lawn. Why not leave two dead on the porch? Uh, you know, all kinds of questions like that. Of course, it's hard to go through try to relate to the mind of someone who's on amphetamines and has just killed five people. You
Right.
know, I don't think there's a lot of rational thought going on throughout this whole thing
Yeah.
that
No,
we
no, definitely not. It's
that we look at soberly from the comfort of our homes. You know, well, gee, I would never do that. You
yeah,
know,
I can never say
yeah,
that in this
yeah,
situation. The thing is, I've been in too many like intense situations where there is no rationale to it,
mm-hmm,
and you get to the point where it's you're in that moment and you're not
mm-hmm,
thinking, like, nothing has prepared you for that.
mm-hmm,
And so there's all that to think about. There's somebody had said earlier on about the possibility of them remembering things wrong, that that's a traumatic thing to happen,
mm-hmm,
like on not just the people that were killed, but people, especially if they're not like career killers sort
mm-hmm,
of thing, then there's all sorts of stuff that can happen to your brain if
mm-hmm,
you through trauma. But
mm-hmm.
that's not starting anything else. It's just
Well,
it was
yeah,
just something
yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, I can't. I mean, as I said before, I can't really imagine it. I can imagine a lot of things, but you know, I killed a deer once, and I couldn't even do it with a hand. It was I had to. It was injured, but I
Right.
couldn't even do that with a handgun. So it's hard for
Right.
me to imagine walking up to a person and stabbing them 16 times. You know, and anything's possible, because I know from my own experience that when you're under the influence of things, and unfortunately, if you have a little bit of darkness in your soul, I mean, I think we all have to admit. Uh, well, maybe we don't. Maybe I should shut up. Uh,
Yeah.
but
Careful. We're
I mean,
live.
there's no telling. I know people that have done things that are so irrational. The man is a reasoning creature, and he tends to think that things happen for a reason, and so many things don't happen for any quote reason that you can
Right.
say A, B, C, D, E. They just happen. Uh,
Mhm.
all of what happens in nature pretty much gee, why would there be an earthquake? But just because there was, the earth didn't think about why I'm doing this. So it's a lot of that with people. They get so removed from their natural animal state, being civilized creatures, that they forget that they've still got a wealth of unknown things going on in their mind, that they don't have any idea what's going on.
And things get out of control.
And they get out of control, and especially when you're under the influence of alcohol or narcotics that affect your judgment and lower your caring about anything. I mean, it can be a pretty low place to be.
Agreed.
So I'm wondering if anybody else is here with a comment. I think I do encourage people to contact me. I want to get this rolling. I want this to be interactive. I would actually love to have 10 people on here having a good discussion about things.
Right.
And hear different points of view. So that's where I want to go with this podcast. I've done the presentations. These live things are a little different. They're a little more, I don't know. I just feel like I'm a little bit more on the point. Like I got to be perfect. I'm up in front of the class now. Yeah, I can't just hand in a term paper and hope for the best. So, but I really do encourage people to get in touch with me and let's talk. I've got 2 people already that I think we can do something with, and I don't want to go back and forth with Paul all the time. I love having him as a guest, and I love being on his show because he's easy to talk to, and he's got a lot of good thinking. Except for this episode.
Yeah. So, thanks, George.
No, that's okay. No, we all have our. You've made your points, and I can see where you stand. And I don't want to just keep chasing you around and batting down what you're saying.
Right.
Did you ever talk? Did you ever talk to Paul Greenwald, by the way?
No, I haven't been able to get a hold of him.
No.
I don't even know if he's still alive yet.
Maybe his phone line was cut.
You never know. Oh, thanks, George. Yeah. Thanks again for having me too. It's always a blast.
I think well, I'm going to get out of here, and while I'm still doing so well, because it seems like people can still hear me. Is that right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. We're batting 1,000 right now.
And they can actually see me too. They've actually seen the whole show. When I did that whole show that nobody watched, it was good because I could watch it later and see my mistakes. But it was like, that's over. What do you mean nobody saw it? I'm sitting here talking to myself like usual, as usual. Really. Okay. Well, let me get back here into brand. Paul, I want to thank you for coming on. I want to thank everybody who made comments on the first show. I'd like to hear your comments on this show. I'd like to hear from you and continue this conversation, not solely about blood and blood spatters, but anything else about the case that piques your interest or you're curious about. Let's talk about it, and let's have an open kind of adult conversation. I mean, we don't need to have Vera Dreisers around here and people who are pretending to be somebody else.
Right.
I mean, I kind of get it when I was 8, but now that I'm not, I don't really understand it. But I guess some people stayed in. So let me get into where I just want to go. And Paul, if you don't mind, you can just sit there for a while I turn this on. And we'll say goodbye to everybody. Thanks for coming, everyone. I hope you come next time. I don't know when that'll be, but I'll try to set it up. This is pretty easy to set up in various locations. I'm out here in beautiful Goler Wash, as you can see.
It's very nice out.
It is. It's one of my favorite places to be, actually. That's one of my favorite.
That's awesome.
That's the view down the wash from the front yard of Barker Ranch. Sunset.
It's beautiful. That'd be a good show too, George, for you to talk about being out at Goler Wash and your trips out there.
Well, I could do that, and I could tell you Bill Nelson stories all day long. And
that'd be a good one.
We did a lot out in the desert. In the 90s, we used to go out there like every couple of weeks, and sometimes stay out there for 3 or 4 weeks. And that was a long time ago. But I don't want to get everybody off on another tangent because we're talking about blood, and as usual, we come to no solid conclusions. So
yes,
we'll leave this open for more discussion later. We'll look at I'll download the chats and see if there are any other things that we want to deal with. And we'll look forward to hearing from some of you other viewers, and maybe we can get you on here and talk about more things. So we're going to look forward to doing that. And Paul, if you want to say goodnight to everybody, I'll say goodnight to everybody, and I'm going to roll the closing. Okay.
All right. Thanks, George.
Good night. Thanks. Bye.
Good night.
This has been the Goodbye Helter Skelter podcast, the podcast dedicated to the truth about the Tate LaBianca murders, Charles Manson, and more. The views expressed on this program are solely those of the individual speakers, and they do not necessarily represent the thoughts, ideas, or opinions of any other persons, either living or dead. Visit our companion website at www.goodbyehelterskelter.com. There you can find more information about this podcast. Also, check out the Goodbye Helter Skelter Facebook page for information on upcoming programs. And let us know what you think by way of contact@goodbyehelterskelter.com. We will address any comments, questions, or concerns on future installments of the Goodbye Helter Skelter podcast.